The leaves turn gold, the weather turned cold, and the story began to unfold. It's 1976, a season still alive. The legends and the memories that time could never hide. From the kickoff in September to the champions at the end, we turn the pages back again and live those days once more, my friend.
Welcome to Pigskin Glory, where we turn the clock back exactly 50 years and relive the stories that changed the game we love, football. It's June 1976. The games haven't started yet. Training camps are just around the corner. But don't mistake offseason for nothing happening. Because while players are trying to enjoy the last month of summer, owners are fighting each other, the commissioner is under fire, the contracts are getting bigger, stars are changing teams, and football is beginning to look a lot more like the business we know today. Tonight we'll break down one of the biggest labor battles in NFL history. We'll discuss why O.J. Simpson's name suddenly surfaced in trade rumors. We'll look at John Riggins becoming a Washington Redskin. We'll head north of the border as the CFL preseason gets underway, and we'll revisit Chiefs legend Otis Taylor wearing a different uniform. We'll open another issue of Football Digest. We'll see what's in Sports Illustrated, what they had to say. Check out the latest CFL standings. Charles will bring us up to date on baseball. Chris has another segment on football, and Mark will chime in with some NBA history. But first, let's take a look at some of the other stories making headlines during June of 1976. The NFL Players Association and League continued battling over free agency and the Rozelle Rule. Rams owner Carroll Rosenbloom publicly criticized Commissioner Pete Rozelle, creating one of the biggest owner versus commissioner feuds the league had ever seen. Jim Plunkett officially became a San Francisco 49er, hoping a change of scenery would revive his career. Joe Gilliam attempted an NFL comeback with the New Orleans Saints. Dick Butkus traded shoulder pads for Hollywood, appearing in Disney's Gus. Fritz Pollard reflected on breaking football's color barrier decades earlier. Ray Guy became the highest paid kicking specialist in football history. Danny White suffered, that's from July, we'll move on past that one. Across the border, the CFL preseason kicked off with several exciting exhibition games as teams prepared for another Grey Cup chase. And those are just some of the stories making headlines in the football world as we prepare for the 1976 season. Now, there's one story this month that towers over everything else. No touchdowns, no championships, no game-winning drives. Instead, it was a battle over who really controlled professional football. And it would help change the NFL forever. So let's talk about the labor dispute. You know, if you were an NFL fan in June of 1976, you were probably wondering one thing. Can somebody just play football already? Because it seemed like every newspaper you picked up had another story about lawsuits, another story about contracts, another owner complaining, another court ruling, another labor dispute. The biggest issue hanging over the league was the Rozelle Rule. For years, if a player played out his contract and signed with another team, Commissioner Pete Rozelle had the authority to award compensation to the player's former team. The problem was, nobody knew what that compensation would be. It could be draft picks, it could be players, it could be enough to scare teams away from signing free agents altogether. The courts had already ruled against the rule once, but the legal battles were far from over. Throughout June, there were new court filings, new rulings, new appeals, and growing pressure from the Players Association. The fight over free agency wasn't slowing down, it was accelerating. And then you had Carroll Rosenbloom, owner of the Los Angeles Rams, publicly taking shots at Commissioner Rozelle. Rosenbloom wasn't exactly known for holding back his opinions, and throughout the month he made it clear he thought league offices need to change how it handled labor issues and player movement. Not everyone agreed. George Halas, the legendary owner of the Chicago Bears, defended the NFL draft and ended the existing system. From his perspective, the draft and compensation rules were essential for keeping the league competitive. Without them, he feared the richest teams would simply stockpile the best talent. So here we are, owners arguing, players are suing, commissioners defending themselves, lawyers being billed by the hour, and fans just waiting for somebody to kick a football. I'll admit, if I were living through the summer of 1976, I'd probably be frustrated. I'd be thinking, enough already. Can we just get to training camp? But here's the thing. This summer mattered. Without these battles, there's no Reggie White becoming the biggest free agent in NFL history. There isn't your favorite team landing that franchise-changing star in the early 2000s. There isn't Vince Young standing in front of reporters in 2011 calling the Eagles a dream team because Philadelphia had signed half the free agent market. Love free agency or hate it, the NFL we know today was built on these arguments, lawsuits, and growing pains of 1976. So yeah, this month is a little messy. It's full of courtrooms instead of end zones, contracts instead of touchdowns. They're arguing in court, they fought in boardrooms, and they're negotiated across conference tables. So sit back, relax, and enjoy the chaos. Because the summer of 1976 wasn't just making headlines, it was quietly reshaping professional football for generations to come. Now, school is officially out for the summer. Kids are celebrating. Teachers are celebrating. Parents are wondering why summer vacation is 2.5 months long. Let's bring in the panel. Chris is joining us from Wisconsin. Chris, you strike me as a kid who heard the final school bell ring and was already halfway to the football field before the teacher finished saying, "Have a nice summer."
Yep.
Charles joins us from California. Charles, I'm guessing your summers were a little different. School ended, baseball season was in full swing, and football probably wasn't even on your radar until August.
Right.
And Mark is here as well. Mark, you seem like the type who actually looked forward to summer reading list.
Yes, I ended up would read lots of different sporting events during the summer and see how things would play out.
All right, gentlemen. June of 1976 wasn't exactly filled with the highlight reel touchdowns or miracle finishes. Instead, it was lawsuits, labor negotiations, and all that. When you look back at June of 1976, do you see this as an important turning point in the NFL history, or do you think fans at the time were just waiting for somebody to stop talking and play football? Chris, let me start with you. As a Bills fan, how much attention would you have paid to the Rozelle Rule and labor news, or would you have been just counting the days until O.J. Simpson reported to training camp?
I would have been counting down the days till OJ, because at this point, all you're trying to think about is, who are we playing? Who do we play first? Is someone not going to get hurt in the thing? Because, it's not like, remember, this is also the first year of the baseball free agency, but with football, we're still waiting for that decision. Plus, the NFL, and it should be noted, the NFL does not have a Marvin Miller equivalent at this time.
Right. All right, Charles. George Halas believed the draft and the old system protected competitive balance. Looking back with 50 years of hindsight, do you think he had a point?
I believe he did. You look at the NFL draft, especially in 1976. I think a team that might benefit more than not is the New England Patriots, based on the players that I mentioned, that the Patriots drafted in a previous Pigskin Glory segment I did about a month ago when we did the NFL draft.
And Mark, go ahead.
The team to keep an eye on the AFC East. I know the Miami Dolphins are going to be forced to be reckoned with again. Again, the Baltimore Colts and other, but keep an eye on the New England Patriots. If the players they drafted pan out, they could be a surprise team this year.
Okay, Mark. Carroll Rosenbloom publicly criticized Pete Rozelle. It wasn't exactly common in those days for owners to do such. Do you think this was simply an outspoken owner, or was that the first sign that the league's power structure was beginning to change?
I agree with the former. The power structure was beginning to change, and you got to start somewhere with a small crack. It takes one person saying one thing, and then it takes more and more coming out to change it. That's exactly what I think it was, the beginning of that.
All right. Let's move on to the next topic, O.J. Simpson's trade rumors. Let's begin with what was probably one of the bigger stories in June of 1976. For the first time in his career, there were legitimate rumors that O.J. Simpson might not be a Buffalo Bill. Imagine reading that headline in the summer of 1976. We're talking about the first player in NFL history to rush for over 2,000 yards in a single season. The face of the Bills franchise, one of the most recognizable athletes in America. And suddenly, his name is appearing in trade rumors. The report suggested several teams had expressed interest, but Bills owner Ralph Wilson wasn't interested in moving his superstar running back. Looking back, Buffalo made the right football decision. OJ would go on to rush for over 1,500 yards in 76 and remain one of the league's elite backs. And as a Bills fan, I have mixed feelings reading those stories. On one hand, I'm relieved Ralph Wilson didn't pull the trigger. You don't trade the best player in franchise history while he's still in his prime. On the other hand, these articles also tell us something. OJ wanted out, whether it was money, frustration with the team's direction, or simply wanting a change of scenery. There are clearly smoke here. And where there's smoke, there's usually fire. As fans, we often celebrate when our team keeps its biggest star. But if that player has already decided he wants to leave, sometimes all you're doing is delaying the inevitable. Fortunately for Buffalo, OJ stayed, rewarded that decision with another outstanding season. Still, it's fascinating to wonder, what if one of those trades, especially the Los Angeles one, had actually happened? Would it have changed Bill's history? Would it have changed OJ's career? Or would both sides have been worse off? Mark, I'm going to start with you. If you're Ralph Wilson in June of 1976, if there's any trade package another team could have offered that would have made you move the best player in football?
Yeah, I'd have to look and see what the situation was. I'm more inclined to want to keep him. He hasn't shown any signs really yet of slowing down. He's still putting up 1,000+ yards every year, and I'm not inclined to want to trade him. I'm inclined to want to keep this guy, short of him doing the inevitable and just not showing up and sitting out.
Okay. Chris, put yourself in the shoes of Bills fans back then. Do you think most fans believed these trade rumors, or did they just assume there was no way Buffalo would ever trade O.J. Simpson?
I just don't think they would have, because think about the timing of it. OJ just had a record-breaking season. He scored all the touchdowns. They had an amazing offense. They had the best statistical offense of the 1970s. So it's not like they were declining in 75. They just had some, bad luck on the defense. And you figured, hey, Miami missed the playoffs for the first time in years. We don't know what to make of the Patriots. We don't know what to make of the Jets. Were the Colts just a fluke? So why would you want out right now? And plus, you mentioned a what if in retrospect. Here's the other thing about it. When the Bills did eventually trade O.J. Simpson to San Francisco, one of the picks they got was packaged with the Tom Cousineau trade that eventually netted them Jim Kelly. If they make that Rams trade in 76, maybe there is no Jim Kelly. If with that trade, maybe the K-Gun era never happens.
That is a hell of a point and great insight that you don't even think about the domino effect of whether they make the trade or not. I mean, if that trade happens in 76, who knows who we draft in 83 as a quarterback? We might have ended up with Richard Todd. Charles, history is full of superstar trades that shocked everyone. Looking back with 50 years of hindsight, where do these OJ rumors rank among the biggest what-ifs in sports history?
Definitely one of those what ifs. Definitely one of those biggest what ifs. For example, O.J. Simpson said in a San Francisco newspaper on June 13th, he said he wanted to be traded to a West Coast team, and money just wasn't a factor. Right now, I probably plan to play only one more year, and it's important to me that I don't spend another 7 months away from my family. Basically, he's saying, trade me out west or I'll retire. Yeah. And as Chris said, if OJ was traded to the Rams or the 49ers, how would I fare with Plunkett and OJ on the offense? And what if he went to the Raiders? How many Super Bowl would the Raiders have won besides the one they did ultimately would win in 6 months?
One thing that I do want just to think about in this topic of what ifs, if the Rams did trade for OJ in 76, does OJ play in a Super Bowl?
Instead of the Minnesota Vikings.
I mean, the Rams made the Super Bowl in 79, but OJ was already pretty much done by then.
That was his last year, actually.
So does he play in a Super Bowl? Do they go and get the Wendell Tyler or something like that instead with OJ on the roster? I mean, there's a lot of what ifs. There's actually NFL.com used to do a fascinating series called the NFL, and this one is not a topic they ever covered, but it would have been a good one.
Just the Jim Kelly perspective, because again, when they did trade him, the pick they got was packaged when Tom Kuzno didn't want to go. And again, that's the domino effect, Jim Kelly. And, I know Jim Kelly didn't originally play in 83, but you know how that led to. And, well, since Vinny met Jim Kelly, it's also worth noting again about the domino effect.
Yes, for those of you on Pigskin Glory that don't know, I met Jim Kelly at an autograph signing about 2 weeks ago. And you can find out more about that on the History of the Buffalo Bills Facebook page or my author page under Arian A. Vincent Author. Sometimes the biggest stories are the ones that never actually happened. OJ stayed in Buffalo. But another star running back was about to change teams for real. Let's talk about John Riggins heading to Washington. Our second story of the month, one of the biggest free agent signings of June of 1976, didn't involve a Hall of Fame quarterback or superstar receiver. It involved a bruising running back who had just grown frustrated with his current team, the New York Jets. John Riggins was officially headed to Washington. Now, looking back 50 years, this seems like one of the biggest no-brainers in NFL history. We know what happens next. We know he'll become the Diesel. We know he'll help lead Washington to a Super Bowl championship and produce one of the greatest postseason performances by a running back the NFL has ever seen. But in June of 1976, none of that has happened yet. Riggins was coming off 5 solid seasons with the New York Jets, but contract negotiations with the Jets broke down, and Washington stepped in. George Allen was looking for veterans who could help his team win immediately, and Riggins fit that philosophy perfectly. At that time, it looked like a good signing. History would prove it was one of the best free agency acquisitions the NFL has ever seen. But it also raises an interesting question. Would John Riggins have become John Riggins if he had stayed with the Jets? Or did changing organizations completely change the course of his career? Charles, I'm going to start with you on this one. When you look back at this signing, was it more about Washington recognizing what the Jets didn't have, or was it simply the perfect player landing with the perfect coach at exactly the right time?
Spot on. The Jets were 3-11 in 1975. The Redskins were 8-6, and the Redskins definitely need a fullback, and that's where John Riggins interstates left. And also, if Riggins stayed put with the Jets, how would he have fared under Lou Holtz?
Good question. Mark, George Allen had a reputation for loving veterans. He built his entire teams around experienced players instead of developing young talent, the over-the-hill gang. Do you think Riggins was a perfect example of Allen's philosophy paying off?
Yes, I do. It was a guy who'd already been there and knew how to win. He's had some really good solid years for the Jets, and I think if you're looking to win immediately, not developing a young talent, it's going to take you 2, 3, 4 years. You bring him in, and you can get some production right away.
Chris, as football fans, we love talking about the biggest free agent signings in history. When you put John Riggins in Washington alongside names like Reggie White going to Green Bay or Peyton Manning signing with Denver, where does this move rank for you in terms of changing NFL history?
Well, the first thing I want to note is Washington already had a good runner. They actually had Offensive Rookie of the Year Mike Thomas in 1975. I think maybe they thought he could help them block or give them a double-rigged attack. But it's a very important one because Charles talks about around this time Messersmith and McNally and the Reggie White didn't come until decades later, the Plan A, Plan B for you. So I guess you could call John Riggins the Andy Messersmith of football.
You mean Riggins started to play a 76 season without a contract?
No, he's joining a new team. He went from the Jets to the Redskins, as in changing teams.
It's funny how history works. At the time, this was just another June signing. I mean, this is the first of its kind, but today we remember it as the beginning of one of the greatest careers in Washington football history. And speaking of football getting underway, let's head north of the border where the CFL preseason is kicking off and giving fans their first taste of football in 1976. While the NFL was fighting busy contracts in courtrooms and negotiating lawsuits, the Canadian Football League was actually playing football. The CFL preseason officially got underway in June. And for football-starved fans, it was finally time to watch somebody put on a helmet and hit somebody. We saw some entertaining games right out of the gate. Calgary looked good. Saskatchewan gets off to a good start. British Columbia knocks off defending Grey Cup champion Edmonton. And the Toronto Argonauts quietly put together the perfect preseason, as we'll see through July. Now I know it's only the preseason. Wins and losses don't count. But if you're a fan, you always convince yourself they do. And for me, I'm hoping this is the year for Toronto. The Argonauts hadn't won a Grey Cup in a few years. Maybe this preseason doesn't mean anything. Maybe it's the first sign this team is finally headed in the right direction. That's the beauty of June football. Every fan is undefeated. Every team has hope, and every championship dream comes alive. Chris, let's start with you. How much stock do you put in preseason football? Can it actually tell us something about a team, or is it just a chance for coaches to evaluate players?
It's kind of a double-edged sword because there's a lot of examples going both ways. And Vinny, here's one the 1990 Bills did not win a preseason game, but they went 13-3 in the games that mattered. Mark, one of the great players in your team's history, pretty much made a name for himself in the preseason. Terrell Davis on special teams.
Yes.
But on the flip side, the 2008 Detroit Lions, who came off a nice 7-9 season, were undefeated in the preseason. And then they proceeded to win as many games in the regular season as we did.
I don't know about you, but I was playing Madden and winning games. Charles, looking at the early exhibition games, was there a team that caught your eye, or do you think this is simply too early to take anything seriously until the regular season?
Too early to take anything seriously. And I've said before, it doesn't apply to any sport, NFL, Major League, NBA, NHL. The only thing with exhibition games is don't get hurt. Or in the case of the NFL, minimize the injury. Because there's going to be injuries in football, sports, physically demanding. Just make sure that they're not serious injuries.
You know, it's a great point, and one thing as we move into NFL preseasons, and the longer we're able to do this, if we're here 20 years from now talking about football in the 90s, there's some huge preseason injuries that take place. And a player that just popped up in the July feed, Darryl Stingley, one of the worst injuries ever suffered. I believe that was a preseason game, was it not?
Yes.
So I mean, we are definitely in Pigskin Glory going to be talking about preseason injuries. Make sure you hit that follow button, share, and subscribe so you can relive these moments as we go. Mark, the CFL has always done things a little differently than the NFL. 3 downs, a bigger field, unlimited forward motion. What do you think is the biggest adjustment for someone who's only ever watched the NFL?
There's a bunch. The one biggest adjustment. I probably would say the biggest adjustment would be if you kick a field goal and you miss it and you don't get it out of the end zone, it's an automatic point. That rule doesn't exist anywhere in the NFL. There's other rules that can exist. That's the one rule that's much, much different.
The Rouge or the single, it also exists in modern indoor football league. But and if you, one of my other channels lists date and touchdown history, which you can follow on YouTube and Facebook. Recently, I've shown both a 120 and a 121-yard missed field goal return because you take the ball out of the end zone, and again, like we've seen with the longest field goal return, missed field goal return in NFL history of 109 yards, the kicking team isn't the coverage team if you had punted the ball. One thing is for certain, football is officially back. After months of headlines about lawsuits and labor negotiations, that was probably the best news fans could ask for. It may be north of the border, but in the month of July, we'll see some NFL preseason action toward the end. All right, this is a topic that may not have made big headlines when it happened on June 2nd, but it brings to mind something else, and it's Otis Taylor. Our final topic for the month is one that came completely out of left field for me. I've always been fascinated by great players who finish their careers somewhere else. I remember a Football Digest in the late 80s doing a whole article on Joe Namath in a Rams uniform, Johnny Unitas with the Chargers, Franco Harris in Seattle, Jerry Rice in Oakland, Emmitt Smith in Arizona. Football fans, those images just look wrong. It's almost like your brain refuses to accept them. But when we were putting together the June newspaper stories, I came across one that I honestly didn't know about. Otis Taylor with the Houston Oilers. I had no idea. When I think of Otis Taylor, I think of that Super Bowl IV touchdown. I think of the Kansas City Chiefs. I think of that like I said, that touchdown in Super Bowl IV. I think of one of the AFL's greatest receivers of all time. I don't think of Columbia Blue and an Oiler helmet. Yet, there he was. It reminded me that even the greatest players eventually reached a point where teams have to make difficult decisions. Len Dawson had retired. There's a new coach in Kansas City. Sometimes a legend has one more season left, but it's not with a team that you remember him with. And sometimes, like Otis Taylor's case, that final stop becomes almost forgotten by history. That's one of the things I've really enjoyed about doing Pigskin Glory. Even after decades of following football history and being a self-professed football historian, there's still stories that make me stop and say, wait, I never knew that. Chris, I'll start with you. Is there one player who looks completely out of place in another uniform? Every time you see the picture, you still think that just doesn't look right.
Does it have to be football? Because I can think of some hockey examples.
No, go ahead.
I'll start with a couple in hockey. Alexander McGillney, the recently inducted Hockey Hall of Famer, he's most well known with the Sabres and the Canucks in the league. Actually, Dale Howardchuk, I think, at one point played for the St. Louis Blues. But to use an NFL example, I think maybe one of the more interesting ones, did you know that Neil Smith, best known as a Chief and a Bronco, ended his career on the Chargers?
I do vaguely remember that, but it doesn't remind me of... I don't remember any in-game action. Just for some reason, seeing him in a Chargers uniform is stuck in my head.
Mark, how about you? I'm sure there's a couple... how about you, Mark? What's one of those instances of... Wait, he's on that team?
Franco Harris, Seattle Seahawks, 1984. Just as I'm starting to follow football.
What about you, Charles? There's got to be that baseball legend.
I want to ask John Small. As much as I see John Small with the Red Sox in 2009, he's a brag as far as I'm concerned. Or we'll go back to 1975. Harmon Tillman with the Kansas City Royals after spending his entire career with the Twins.
The only good thing about the first name you mentioned, Smalls, there, I follow the Red Sox too, so at least I was able to continue. But the Braves are my team.
Going back to Otis Taylor, I think he was traded to Houston to the Oilers because well, he only played one game, I think, in week 1 in Denver, bro, and then he got hurt. I don't think he played all the entire year. And it turns out that Otis Taylor would not play a game for the Houston Oilers in 1976.
That's probably one of the reasons why I don't remember. I've never seen or heard about it.
And by the way, I'll just quickly mention that 75 week 1 Chiefs Broncos. Vinny, that's a game we covered in Pigskin Glory for last year, 75, the opener, Kansas City Denver. We actually did that game, which ended up being his last game as a Chief.
It's funny how football history works. Sometimes the biggest discoveries aren't championships or record-breaking performances. Sometimes it's simply finding a photograph of a Hall of Fame player wearing a uniform.
And that was why he was traded. To Houston. He never suited up for Houston. He was released by the team during the preseason before the regular season began.
Well, that is something we're definitely going to be getting to in the coming weeks and months of Pigskin Glory, and it's exactly why we love digging through these old newspapers. And if you want to see the day-by-day postings, you can find them on Facebook at Pigskin Glory, Football 50 Years Ago Today. Or if you just want a quick recap later in the evening, around 6 p.m. every day, go to YouTube for the Pigskin Glory recap. Again, the channels and the Facebook page, same name as this podcast. Actually, you're probably watching on one of them, so... All right, every month we also take a look back at Football Digest. It was one of my favorite magazines growing up. If you're a fan in 1976, this is one of the magazines you're picking up in the newsstand while you're waiting for training camp to begin. May and July didn't have issues. The June issue had a little bit of everything. Player profiles, coaching tips, previews on the upcoming season, and even some classic advertisements that instantly transport you back to the mid-1970s. We did a complete breakdown on Facebook of the issue where you can go back and look. So if you like to see the cover, the feature stories, and some of those wonderfully nostalgic ads, be sure to check that out on the show. Of course, it wouldn't be a month of sports without Sports Illustrated. June's issues covered several football stories, including the continuing labor dispute between the NFL and the Players Association, along with features of some of the league's biggest stars. Not as much as it'll cover, obviously, getting into the summertime, but like Football Digest, we've already posted our complete look at each June issue over on Facebook. You can go see the covers and the football stories we highlighted throughout the month. If you're a fan of sports history, or just enjoy seeing what was making headlines exactly 50 years ago, I think you really like those posts. Mark, we've looked through a lot of old magazines over the past several months. What stands out to you the most? The writing, the photography, or just how different sports journalism felt to today?
Yeah, I think I think a little bit of everything. Photographies and the sports journalism, I think, is what stands out to me the most.
And also in 1976, as far as sports journalism goes, I think for the first time ever, there are females to be covering football teams. For the Boston Globe, for example, Leslie Vest will be covering the Patriots in the Boston Globe for 1976.
That's an interesting note as well. Thank you, Charles. Chris, if you were standing on a newsstand in June of 1976 and could only buy one, are you picking up Football Digest or that week's Sports Illustrated, and why?
I'm going Sports Illustrated because if you're talking about Digest, I was always a Hockey Digest guy, and Sports Illustrated is a little more well-rounded. And as I already said, I was never a Football Digest guy. I was always a Hockey Digest guy. And by the way, those issues were still out in 1976.
And let's not forget the Sporting News.
So I collected all four: football, baseball, hockey, and basketball Digest. Obviously, football was my favorite. My brother had the subscription there. I had the subscription to Baseball Digest, and I would occasionally get a hockey or a basketball. And I had a subscription to Sports Illustrated. I have tried to rebuild those subscriptions as I've gone through my adult life. And thanks to this project, I have every Sports Illustrated in 1976 up to July 12th. And I will keep purchasing them. Thank you, eBay, to be able to do that. Let's see how the football season itself is shaping up. We now come to our next segment where we're going to look at the leagues, look at some of the big games of the month, and the standings. Before we turn things over for the final segments, the CFL is just getting underway, so there aren't any standings. It's preseason to look at. Yet, we've had just 5 exhibition games by June 30th to kick off the preseason. Here's how they finished. Saskatchewan opened the preseason with an 18-6 victory over British Columbia. Ottawa defeated the defending Grey Cup champion Edmonton Eskimos 40-25. Winnipeg topped Calgary 39-27, and BC defeated Toronto 27-18. Montreal rolled past Hamilton 25-1. Yes, 1. We talked about the Rouge earlier. We had a game that ended with just 1 point. You can have that in the NFL. Look up the 1-point safety, but it's never happened yet. It's far too early to draw any real conclusions. Veterans are getting few snaps. Rookies are fighting for jobs. Coaches are trying to figure out who will be on the roster when the games start to count. But after a long offseason, football is finally back, and that's enough to get Canadian fans excited. Mark, when you're watching preseason football, what are you looking for? Are you paying attention to the final score, or are you more interested in individual players trying to earn a roster spot?
Yeah, I'm not looking at the scores as much as I'm looking to see who on the team can make plays in a certain key situation, because that'll tell me who's going to be on the roster and who will be traded or cut.
And again, Mark, I'll mention this again, Terrell Davis. This is a guy you know very well, how it was a...
crushing tackle on a special teams that got him landed on the team.
And go figure, a special teams tackle launched the career of a Hall of Fame running back.
Chris, if you had to pick one of those 5 exhibition results that caught your attention, which one stands out the most?
25-1. I mean, I've seen shutouts, I've seen scoring, but 1 point, that's hard to do.
Charles, if that were a baseball game, you would call that a hell of a pitching game from one pitcher and an offensive explosion on the other.
Well, Pirates nearly equaled that a year earlier in Chicago, 22-0, when he still had 7 hits in 9 innings.
And now we've come to our closing segments where the guys are going to talk about something that is happening in 1976, and we're going to start. Charles has been patiently waiting all show. It's time to bring our monthly trip around the Major League Baseball. We've covered a busy month in football, but June isn't just about football. In fact, it hardly was about football back then. Pennant races are heating up, stars are beginning to separate themselves from the pack, and before long, baseball fans will be talking about the All-Star Game. That means it's time for Charles Count.
Good afternoon.
Charles. Our monthly trip around the world of Major League Baseball. Charles, go ahead. Take it away.
All right. In the National League East, leads the Philadelphia Phillies are definitely on a breakout start. The 50-20, 90.5 last year's East champion Pittsburgh Pirates. Sorry, Mark. And out west, the Reds have jumped past the Dodgers and moved into first place, 4.5 games ahead of Cincinnati. And the Yankees, led by newly appointed captain Thurman Munson, up 7 games over Cleveland. The Tigers, who lost 105 games a year ago, are only a game under 500, largely because of a rising star named the Bird, Mark Frederick. 8-1 at the end of June, and on June 28th, in front of a national television audience, the Bird pitched a complete game victory in less than 2 hours, 5-1. That game's on YouTube, by the way. And out west, a couple of upstarts taking over in the west. The Kansas City Royals, 44-27, 3.5 games ahead of Texas in the division. And on the home run total, Dave Kingman has 27 home runs, including a hat trick in Los Angeles on June 4th. Al Alvaro does have a 357 average if you're a Pirates, Mark. On the AL side, George Brett had a 361 clip. Ron LaFleur, who 3 years earlier was behind bars, is now hitting the ball out of the baseball. 351 average, second in the league at this point, with Sal Bando leading the league in homers with 14 and Jeff Burke with 54 RBIs. But the big story, you could say was a sale or non-sale, if you could call it that. Because on June 15th, the trade deadline, that's when Charlie Finley's age, 11.5 games out, sold Vida Blue to the Yankees and Joe Rooney and Wally Fingers to Boston for $3.5 million total. The Red Sox were playing Oakland that night. Fingers and Blue switched over to the Boston dugout. And Vida Blue's contract even more bizarre. For the penny-pinching Finley had signed Blue to a contract extension with an uncharacteristic raise. Blue signed a 3-year deal with about maybe $600 for about maybe $1 million over 3 years. And then shortly thereafter, the news gets out that Blue has sold the Yankees. Well, Bowie Kuhn stepped in and said, no, we can't sell these players like cattle. And Charlie thought he could. 3 days later, Bowie Kuhn canceled the sale of those 3 players. Now, and somewhat ways, Bowie Kuhn for acting the best in the baseball in a manner not dissimilar to the NFL topics earlier, where if the decision was upheld, then the fear among the general public, all the rich teams would get every star player. Thus, the competitive imbalance. Maybe that's what Bowie Q was pondering when he avoided those sales.
Oh. Thanks, Charles. Now we head back to the gridiron for our next segment. Every month, Chris brings us something a little different from around the world. And this month, in Chris's Corner, he's taking a look at the upcoming 1976 Monday Night Football schedule and the matchups the fans will be looking forward to this fall. Chris, it's all yours.
Good evening, ladies and germs. In my corner, we're going to be looking at the marquee Monday Night Football schedule because at this time, Monday Night Football was like the crown jewel of the NFL television schedule. Now, an interesting trend I notice is that of the 14 weeks, and that includes a Saturday game, 6 of the first 7 games are division games. Only 1 of the last 7 is a division game. So it goes both ways. You start with Miami at Buffalo, and Vinny knows about that whole Dolphin Bill thing. And and the 2 games they played last year, including the one at Orchard Park, were real barn burners, especially the one at Orchard Park. And you know Buffalo's itching to get at Miami after all those losses. Oakland at Kansas City. The Raiders got ambushed at Arrowhead last year on a game that took place the same day as Game 2 of the World Series, so you know the Raiders haven't forgotten that. Week 3, Redskins at Eagles. Washington was swept by Philly last year, which cost them the playoffs almost as much as the Mel Gray Phantom Catch, and you know George Allen wants his revenge there. The one non-division game in the first half of the season, a Super Bowl rematch. Pittsburgh at Minnesota. This time the Steelers have to go into unfriendly territory. Charles, here's a game I know you'll be focused on in October 11th. 49ers at Rams. The Niners won at the LA Coliseum last year on a long field goal. Can they win there again?
Who knows?
The Jets at the Patriots. It's Lou Holtz and Joe Namath against the Patriots, but let's skip that one. And Cardinals at Redskins. I don't need to remind you a couple times of what happened when these teams played a year ago. The phantom catch that kept Washington out of the playoffs. St. Louis goes to Washington this time, and who knows what that's going to be. Now, that's 6 of the first 7 games of our division. The second half, it's the opposite. Houston, Baltimore, 2 of the most surprising teams last year. And, of course, one of them made the playoffs, the other didn't. Here's an interesting one, November 8th. Rams at Bengals, 2 really, really good teams that are trying to overcome that Pittsburgh, Dallas, Minnesota stranglehold. Buffalo at Dallas. Vinny, it's O.J. Simpson at the stadium with the hole in the roof. 2 of the NFL's higher scoring teams last year. Who knows what they'll do this time?
God can watch O.J. run.
And speaking of the AFC teams, Vinny, Colts at Dolphins. Baltimore stunned the football world by upending the seemingly invincible Dolphins. In fact, they beat them at the Orange Bowl last year and beat them twice last year. Charles, the Niners have 2 Monday night games. They host.
I don't want them to get the Minnesota Vikings on November 30th.
That's the Monday after Thanksgiving. And this is an interesting one. The last Monday game.
Across the Bay, Bengals and Raiders.
Yeah, and remember, Cincinnati beat Oakland last October, but Oakland returned the favor in the playoffs. What's going to happen this time? And technically, this is an ABC game. The last game of the year. It's a Saturday night game. Rams at Lions. They played a Thanksgiving game, the first Thanksgiving game indoors. The Lions played like they had tryptophan, but since it's in the month of December, I assume the Lions will not have to deal with any tryptophan this year. And that is a quick look through the world of 1976 NFL, which, by the way, is going to have a new theme song this year.
Great stuff, Chris. And finally, we're going to close the episode by stepping outside of football world for a moment. It's time for Mark's Memories. And this month, Mark, what are we looking at?
Well, you're starting off June of 76, and the NBA Finals is in full. Boston is up 2-1 as we go into Game 4 of the 76 NBA Finals. And after a good back and forth game, the Suns would tie the series up at 2 games apiece, winning a close contest 109-107. They went back to Game 5 on June 4th and played probably at this point in time the greatest NBA games in the history of the finals. 3 overtimes and a miracle shot at the end of the game at the end of the second period to send it to a 3rd overtime. Boston finally prevailed in this one, 128-126. And then they went back to Phoenix. Boston's up 3-2, and they just wore down the Celtics. They won that game 87-80 to close out what would be their last NBA championship for a little while. And they won 4-2.
Good stuff, Mark. That wraps up our look back of June 1976. If you've enjoyed today's episode, we'd really appreciate if you'd hit that like button, subscribe, follow us on Facebook, and leave a comment. Share the show with your fellow football fans. It really helps increase our reach. And don't forget to follow us on Facebook, where you'll find the daily Football 50 Years Ago Today newspaper posts, along with our complete Football Digest and Sports Illustrated features, as we discussed during the show. For Charles, Chris, and Mark, everyone here at Pigskin Glory, thanks for joining us, and we'll see you in July at the training camps.